What's going on, my people? You're listening to The Score, an urban music education podcast hosted by Eric and Justin, where we discuss tips and strategies on how to become a more effective, compassionate, and culturally responsive music educator.
What's going on, my people? This is Eric.
And this is Justin.
And we're your hosts for
The Score.
Welcome to episode 103, The Hustle Outside of Music with Dr. Kelvin Jones. What's up, bro? How you doing, man?
Hey, doing great. Everybody has like a bucket list of things they want to do,
Here we go.
Here we go. Check, I've arrived. Change the schedule. I'm bumming Wi-Fi, so I can make sure that I'm here. So I'm
the funny part, though, he's actually telling the truth. Like, he just got on Wi-Fi about 5 minutes ago, and so. But
I never lie.
Right? No, man, we really appreciate you being here, man. And obviously, we know a little bit about you, but some of our listeners might not. Would you mind telling them about yourself, your upbringing, and what you're doing now?
Sure thing. So I've been told I speak well a time or two, but way before then, I was born in Greenville, Mississippi, in the Delta area. My mother is an educator. My father is a Marine, but retired now after serving 20 plus years there. So I lived the whole military lifestyle. Lived in California, Texas, North Carolina, Okinawa, Japan, for a hot minute. We got there. My mom was like, yeah, we ain't going to stay here for the rest of the time. So, baby, when you get done with your turn, we back in Baton Rouge. So I lived in Louisiana longest, so I claimed Louisiana. Graduated high school in Hawaii. Did my undergrad at Jackson State University. And depending on who's listening, the Jackson State University. While I was there, I did all the things that, you're tattoos. So I was in a marching band, crab, did all that stuff. Was in orchestra, was in jazz band, brass quintet, pep band. My scholarship pretty much said I had to do it. So I did it all. So looking back on it, I'm very thankful for that experience because it kind of helped shape me in the musician that I am, to where I feel like I can dabble anywhere where I've played professionally with, orchestras and jazz groups and all that stuff. So did that. My mentor teacher at the time, Michael Magruder, who's now director of bands at Winston-Salem University, he's at Jackson State, and he was like, hey, get your grad degrees before you have a family. Try to get them ASAP. So I was like, all righty, I'm going to go right into school, and applied and got into LSU grad program there. So I did my master's there. Before then, I was assistant director at a rural area in Mississippi, Hollandale, Mississippi, to be exact, Simmons High School. So that was like a couple of years just helping out, doing things while I was finishing my degree. Master's at LSU, then got my own program at West Feliciana High School in St. Francisville, Louisiana. Here at the program, 13 kids, grew it over 100, did all the things there, sweepstakes. We ended with my last year. We performed in Washington, D.C. for, at that time, President Barack Obama's second inauguration. So we did some cool things while I was there. And then went to LSU for my doctorate degree, where I did some work there. And then got my doctorate, and I guess they liked my freckles, so they hired me on as assistant director. And then from there, I kind of just worked my way up to where I was director of Tiger Band. And just from a historical perspective, just to throw it out there for anybody that know, like the first African-American to have a position like that, not only in LSU's history, but also in the SEC that led athletic band program. So I did that for a while. While I was there, had a cool time, the Joe Burrow years, Heisman and all of that. We did an album with the Zydeco artist that got nominated for a Grammy. So I was fortunate to kind of go to the red carpet and all of that. Random fact about that was we was on the red carpet and everybody kept looking at this lady. And I thought they were looking at me, and I was like, all right, they recognize, we got some Bayou Bengals in here. And they were like, no, that's Doja Cat. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. But, I'm still here too. So anyway, so that was cool. Awesome experience. And then July this past year, I guess before I get into July, I'll talk about it. July, I pretty much just stepped down from that position. I just realized how much time was given into that entity, and I had like a kind of an imbalance from a family perspective. that I could kind of probably get into a little bit more later. So I stepped down from there and said I was just going to focus more so on my quote unquote hustle, which I have a real estate investing company that I do. And then that's kind of blown up into, I do consulting. I'm literally in a place where I'm consulting at right now. Also doing with the real estate. And then some way I got hired back in. So I'm working at the University of Louisiana Lafayette as their visiting assistant professor of music education. But the coolest thing, just to kind of be vulnerable here for a second, is I get to be home when I want to every day by 4 p.m. I don't work on weekends, and I'm already bringing in more money a month than I was at my prior position when I was, doing the 80 to 100 hour, work grind at, director of Tiger Band. I love what I did. There's no necessarily ill regrets or anything with that. I just got to a point where I'm a spiritual person, and just realizing, what am I doing to set up a legacy for my kids and my family? And I've said this before, but it's like if I would have died working so crazy due to stress and anxiety, all the things that any director does, I can't put in my will, my oldest son's going to be director of Tiger Band. Like, quiet as kept, before my head gets cold in the ground, they're going to advertise that job for somebody else. If not, have somebody hired before my funeral. So it was like, I'm putting a lot of time into something. What can I do to kind of create a legacy for my family? And so went through some things, started a side hustle, and then from there kind of just manifested from there. So kind of the longer version of who is this guy with a hat on this podcast.
Well. And the church would say amen at the conclusion of that.
Yep. All right, folks, we hope you have enjoyed this episode. His name is Dr. Kelvin Jones. His contact information. Nah, look, man. On the cool, though, you threw in several things that obviously got a reaction out of Justin and I. With the first being that you speak well. Justin and I can definitely align to that one and that experience. But something that Justin mentioned before we hit record is, and I know it could speak for him, is you being from an HBCU gave representation for us young folks coming out of that same setting, that same institution, that same structure, and seeing you direct the Tiger Band, seeing Greg direct Penn State, seeing other folks that are now going into this space, Devin Moore in Oklahoma. You know what I mean? It's like y'all have Dante Douglas. Let's keep going. That of folks that are
Chandler,
coming from
Florida State. Yeah.
Florida State, you feel me? Yeah. And where one might say like, oh man, you should have worked at an HBCU, and it's like, okay, that might have been an option, but why limit ourselves to just that? So I know that it aligns to what Justin and I were doing in the high school setting, because we had a competitive core style band program. Everybody assumed like, oh, y'all gonna high knee lift, and it's like, no, we get down in the stands, but we can still get competitive and do this style as well. Like, we can come from an HBCU and teach band. Like, we don't let's not go into the specifics. So just thank you for that representation, man, and being in that space that I know it inspired us, but I know how many others it's inspired and still inspires to this day, given that you were the first and you did so much while you were there. So thank you, man. We really appreciate your presence in that space.
I appreciate that. And can I just kind of expound on that a little bit? Because I went through a phase when I was in undergrad. Like, I was there. My choir brother is Dr. Roderick Little, who's now director of bands there at Jackson State. So everybody in that quote unquote pod, like, dream was to be director of bands at Jackson State, myself included, or at least work back at my alma mater. And it wasn't until I kind of got out and experienced other stuff to where that can be an option. It's not the only option.
Yeah.
And I say that from the standpoint of, it was almost insulary where, okay, typically I'm generalizing when I say this, because I come from an HBCU, maybe I don't fit in over there, or they won't value me the same way because my music is different, or I can't teach in this suburban area because they're going to look at the marching style of where I'm from, or, to be frank, the color of my skin, and then make assumptions of where I was. Like, I remember when I was at West Feliciana, my high school I taught at, it's in the Louisiana area. I remember going to meetings and people going, oh, you're from Southern, right? And it's like, if you know anything about Jackson State and Southern, that's like oil and water, right? That's like, oh, Eric, you're from Texas Southern, right? It's like, whoa, stop it. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you don't understand those underground currents, but why would you assume that, oh, because here's this black guy, right? So there was these things to where, could I then fit in? And thankfully, I had a grandfather who was a band director in Mississippi. He was the one, he went to Mississippi Valley State back in the Russell Boone days when they were straight core, the first HBCU to march in the Rose Bowl parade. So his perspective of music was always different. And even some of his colleagues were like, oh, you doing that white people music stuff. So that stuff was just kind of ingrained in me of how do we educate well-rounded musicians, regardless if you're picking up your knees, your ankle come down first or your heel, whatever it is how do you train musicianship? So for me, from that, I realized there was a space where there weren't a lot of people that looked like me from this area, from this background, outside of like the Alfred Watkins, who are like the meccas, right? So it was who from there, and then just, kind of navigating that pathway to show that, oh, my education from Jackson State is valuable, if not more valuable than what maybe some people from other programs don't do. Like we're memorizing music and we're memorizing 7-8 marches, Stars and Stripes Forever, all the things that I mentioned earlier. I'm in jazz band, I'm in orchestra, all these things that I would argue a lot of HBCUs do, but because of the racial connotations, it's viewed as something that's negative. When it's like, I think that's what made me so successful at LSU, because I was able to think about entertainment and showmanship and, the team needs this, so we're going to play this tune, or, oh man, Kendrick Lamar just dropped this track, let's play this right now, because kids listen to that stuff. So we've kind of reached this phase now where DEI is a buzzword and all that, but it's like there are things being taught in the HBCUs, just osmosis, that is super valuable to the educational benefit of what students are getting across the board. So I just want to throw that in there for anybody that's listening with that may view, should I go to HBCU? Should I not? Like, I would not be on this podcast right now, let alone the musician I am, if it weren't for an HBCU in Jackson State University.
And that was the end of the second episode, right? Justin, hold on, I'm sorry, man. That was the end of the second episode. So we're going to splice that one right there and drop it as a... Sorry, man. That was so good. Thank you, man.
Nah, that was. And I think that's a conversation we always have amongst ourselves in our circles. We're constantly talking about, man, I learned this when I was at Prairie View, when I was at Jackson or FAM. And because it's not something that's necessarily in a book or wasn't in a class, but we remember those conversations with our professors. We remember those conversations during a rehearsal and after rehearsal, that when we get into these positions that people have already placed us in a box that says, well, this is what they should be able to do. But because I was doing all of these other things, I actually know how to do this as well. I was just thinking about being on the yard, and I remember our theory teacher, Dr. Cornelius, and our voice teacher and the choral director, Dr. Taylor. They pulled me aside and said, hey, there's this gig at Theater Under the Stars downtown in Houston. You need to go play a part of the band for this major production. And I was just like, I mean, okay, but I don't, do I really need to be doing that? You know what I'm saying? Like, I got to use my gas money. I got to get down there. It was like, you need to do this. Lo and behold, like all of what I was able to do there was putting on a resume. I mean, I'm getting into jobs, I'm getting opportunities because that was an experience that they said that I needed, that I didn't know that I was going to need. But who's to even say that that's an expectation at other colleges that don't look like ours? But that was something that happened for me on the campus of Prairie View A&M University that helped me in so many ways. And I think it just points to the aspect that we can't make up in our minds about certain institutions and environments and learning places until we have met and worked with those people that come from those worlds.
1,000%. And there are people there like, again, I'm a spiritual guy, so I don't want to sound like I'm testimonying up here. But
no, you good. You in good company. You in good company.
Sometimes you're in environments and you don't even know you need to be in. Like I mentioned, my crab brother is Dr. Roderick Little, who's director of bands at Jackson State. I also played in brass quintet with Kevin Johnson, who's the associate director of bands there. My frat brother, who we may have had fraternal interactions, Lowell Hollinger, is over the Symphonic Winds there. While I was there, a guy named Cortez Bryant was playing cymbals. Cortez Bryant is the manager of Lil Wayne.
Right.
It then turned into Drake. And then my crab brother, who's CJ Gibson, is the road manager for Drake and Nicki Minaj. It's like just going down this list of things to where 10 years from then, you're not thinking about none of that stuff. You're just trying to make it,
right.
Get a date or two, just have a good time.
Right.
But it's like, you look back on it, it's like, oh, Drake just had this thing. Drake may be in there. I have a touch point to that. Or 2002, I'm in this club called Soups, and I meet this guy from Mobile, Alabama. That was a Southern's band that plays trumpet. His name is Kedrick Taylor. Kedrick Taylor's now director of bands at Southern, and we both taught. It's like all these weird touch points that was like, we always joke, like, I don't know what was going on in the universe at that time, but you just meet and be around so many people that you never know which bridges are going to cross years from now. And again, that's all from, just from a choice.
Showing up on campus.
Yeah. So 1,000%.
So you hit us with The Hustle Outside of Music. Why'd you choose that title?
Yeah, because I know for me, a lot of stuff. So I started getting into real estate. Really, it was COVID. 2020 is like all this free time, so to speak. And the legacy piece that I mentioned earlier is just like, what can I do to set up something like in the event? And just being honest, like we're in a society now where if anything were to happen, you're kind of guilty, regardless if you're proven innocent. Or let's say if I made a kid upset and they went out and said I did something crazy, which is so untrue, we're in a society where, oh, he guilty. You know what I mean? So like, not saying that I've never done anything like that, but it's just like,
that's a reality.
Do I have the complexion for the protection, to like use a different phrase? And so it's like, all righty, what can I do in the event I can't teach anymore? For whatever reason, I just can't, something happens. What can I do to still provide for my family in a regard? So I feel I've always kind of been a quote unquote hustler, just growing up, figuring out ways to make it. Just, I think my military upbringing, by being a son of a person in the military, always having to move, making new friends, being flexible, being adaptable. How you act in Louisiana may be different from Mississippi. It's definitely different from Hawaii and California. So just kind of that figuring things out element. And so it went from a lot of things to where, I'm pretty good at smoking meat, so I'm going to sell brisket. And then I did 2 events and I made like $280. So I was like, I'm balling. And then I broke down, it took me 22 hours to make this. So I broke everything down, and I'm using approximate numbers, but I do remember very vividly, it broke down to $3.25 an hour. So I was like, barbecue catering, Bones Jones is on a pause. And so, so just all these different things. So anybody that knows me knows I'm always kind of dabbling in a little bit of everything. And then the real estate, I kind of landed on that. I had a thing at church and they were talking about legacy and things you could pass on to your kids. And the more I researched, it was like 93% of all millionaires own real estate. The 7% are like entertainers or actors that kind of come up on it, or lottery winners, things like that. But sustainable wealth, people own something, from Jay-Z, Warren Buffett, you name it. They have some kind of capacity in it. Even Rick Ross owns a couple of Wingstops. So it was just like, how could I figure that out? And then being a teacher, like, there are things, music teacher especially, there are always things where already, if you're good, in my opinion, you're organized. And so you're figuring out time things. All right, I can figure this part out here. We can do that. And so for me, it was figuring out that construct, because I'm not a realtor. I'm not showing houses. I'm not a contractor. If you know me, that kind of labor is not my ministry. So for me, it was just, all right, how can I figure out things? I can figure out puzzles. Like, here's this thing. And then I'm a teacher. And even though I was at LSU, was not necessarily balling. So, just figuring out, all right, how can I leverage maybe banks or other people's funds? Just figuring out this puzzle. It's no different from being at a HBCU. I remember being a trumpet section leader, and we had 40 people in the section. All right, they love weed. They super Afrocentric. That's Marcus Garvey over there. That's Malcolm X over there. That's, like all these different personalities. You got to get it together and have a successful product. So I say that because I'm just basing it back down to navigating just pure leadership. No different from being over Tiger Band, and I had 325 students in my group, and under 80% of them were non-music majors, meaning that their major wasn't music education or performance. So people, after they leave college, they may never touch their instrument again. Right. How do you get them together to put forth that same kind of mindset of success? And so it was the same kind of mindset of figuring out this puzzle, strategizing to do that. So all those things is to where if something would unfortunately happen to me tomorrow, my kids can still be okay. Because to nip this up a second, another guy I'm marching the band with, I shout him out, Joe Handy. He's in Mississippi. At that time, he was a real estate investor, and he had 24 doors, each door cash flowing $200. And when I say cash flow, that means after you pay your mortgage, you pay your taxes, insurance, you put money aside for if the water heater breaks, we call that capital expenditures. Just after all those things, you still bring in $200. And he had 24 doors. And so I was just doing math. And I'm just like, man, you're bringing in like over $4,000 a month and so that almost doubled his teaching. He's a middle school band director. And so now he has like over close to 80 doors. He bought a couple of apartment complexes, but it's just this thing of, okay, if he can do that and leverage that, you can set up a trust and all these things to where his kids can be fine. You know what I mean? So it's just these things, just thinking long term.
Yeah.
And he's a band director. He figured that out. And so that was kind of the start. Those are reasons why the legacy piece, to kind of make it to where like I am now, where I can be flexible. I don't have to do things. Like I already had in my mind, I did not want to be 65 years old, climbing up a ladder on a 50-yard line, so that went from like 60 to like 45 real quick. And so it got to a point where I want to live my life to where I can do what I want to do, not because I have to do.
Yeah.
Like I have to go to this job because, my kids got to eat and all that. Like, no, what things can I do to make sure that my necessities are good? My family's fine. Our quality of life is still the same. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily eating oodles and noodles. We can afford a Big Mac every now and then, but at the same time, I'm not doing something because I have to do it. That's a whole different kind of spiritual energy than I can choose what I want to do and navigate that way.
Wow.
Man, that is It speaks to kind of where me and Eric are, and Eric transitioned into this space. And as I was kind of coming towards the end of my time in the band hall as percussion director and doing all of those things and running drum camp and doing auditions and being and spending all this time, my kids are getting older, and having this call in the ministerial place and in church and getting opportunities and kind of getting hit on the shoulder like, hey man, we'd love to sit down and talk with you about coming on staff. But in my mind, I'm thinking, man, what does that look like? You've been in the classroom for 12, 13 years, July hits, it's on, And so as I'm talking to Eric, and Eric is like, man, this position, this opportunity has come. And I started to think to myself, if I'm willing to bet on myself in the environments that I've taught in, walking into places where it's not been a lot of fanfare with the program, but just saying like, I know what I can do when I get into this office, when I get with these kids, when I start teaching, I said, I'm going to bet on myself place in my career. Because I have a wife, that I was blessed to have growing up was my parents, my mom, principal educator, my whole family, like band, football game, concert, jazz band concert, playing basketball, whatever, everybody was there. And I said, I want to be able to do, as small as that seemed in the moment, in my mind, like it did wonders for me as an adult. And I said, how can I be able to do that? And I'm cutting out of band practice early. I'm leaving my percussion ensemble because I'm trying to get to said performance or pick up a kid. And I said, man, I want to be at a place where I can be there and be present because I know what it did for me. And I know they're not going to understand it. But to look out into the crowd, to see your parents 1,000 yards ahead of wherever you're trying to go, just on a possibility and understanding, like, I don't know half the people in this crowd, but I do know the 6 to 8 that came to see me, and that means that I can do whatever I'm willing to put my mind to and put my work ethic to, I can do that. And so I think betting on yourself, getting to a place where you do start to look at it as like, man, drumming is changing. They doing all kind of stuff in the percussion world. I'm 35. It's not how to get from sideline to sideline. Like, that's just not the place. But how can I still take this infrastructure of what I've done, teaching, community building, making sure people are at their highest level of work, and pour this into this church environment, this missions environment through my local church. And I think once I really got to it, and talking with Eric, and if you know Eric is going to, he's going to make you do whatever it is that you're trying not to do or thinking of. If you're on the edge or something, Eric he's all he got to do is just blow in your ear, and you jumping over the edge. And so, I think being blessed to have people in your life that can say, no, bro, like, you kind of have a skill set that is not just for the band hall, it's actually for all of these different environments. But because band has taken up so much of our life, because being a director and that passion that we had to want to do it, to want to get out there and build and see a program and invest in kids, you kind of start to think, well, how else will I be able to do this? And man, lo and behold, taking that step, trusting the Lord, and having great friends like Eric, it's put me in a position where I'm reliving the same joy that I was having there, but having the space to be able to do what I want to do and what I need to do for my family without being subjugated to like, oh, I'm here till 6 or 7 and weekends. So yeah.
Okay, just jump on that for a second, because you said something that made me as a touch point for me too, like betting on yourself. And it's like, for me, it was, you know what, I have a doctorate from a pretty good university. You know, I've taught at these levels. I've had experience working in quote unquote Title I school. Well, no, quote unquote, it was Title I school, to where the Cadillac of Cadillacs of LSU. And so it's like, let me bet on myself. Worst case scenario, I got to teach middle school band. Or, you know what I mean? Like, worst case, I can't figure this out. Now I need a job. Like, I still have 2 letters in front of my name and DR and 3 behind my name, PhD. So it's like, I can find a job. You know what I mean? So I was like, that was one. And then the other thing, which is on the other spectrum of that, again, just because my belief system and all, is like, man determines your salary, God determines your income. And so it's like having this W-2 mindset of, I have to do this. I'm trained and conditioned because I got to work 9 to 5, and I do that for 30 years or whatever. I'm 62 and a half. Then I get to retire, you know? So it's like this idea of somebody else controlling your life. And I'm kind of a free spirit of like, if I want to fail, let me fail. And certain constructs in education is so predicated on politics. Do the people like you? Do they want to see you succeed? You know what I mean? And your livelihood is subjugated to that. And so the whole analogy of like, man determines your salary. Like, yeah, I may work at this job and I may make $50,000 a year. Uncle Sam's going to get his cut. You know, you got to pay all these things, and whatever's left, you left with. Whereas kind of that's W-2 mindset. W-9 is like, all righty, what if I did a little bit of this? What if I DJ'd on the weekend on this event here? What if I taught this lesson here? What if I worked freelance for this company over here? Like, you then determine / God really the income you can bring in when you kind of bet on yourself in that kind of regard. It's being smart, not being dumb and making dumb decisions, you know, but at the same time, it's like, you know, worst case, what is the worst case scenario for somebody? And for me, it was, I got to teach back in K through 12 schools. I was pretty successful doing that on the front end. Like, I love music. So it's even got to work at McDonald's. Like, my kids going to make sure they good. So.
As we take a break from our discussion, we're jumping into the segment called In Rotation. During this time, each of us will get an opportunity to share what we're currently listening to, favorite artists, genre, album, playlists. If you have any recommendations, drop us a line on our social media platforms at PodTheScore, or send us an email, podthescore@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you.
In rotation, folks. All right, so I got a new DJ I want to shout out. His name is DJ Diego Alonso. It was one of those just that popped up on autoplay on my YouTube, and his mix is called Fiesta Mexicana. It's a 57 minute mix on YouTube, going from everything from like Luis Miguel in the 80s to Grupo Frontera right now, to some Spanish rock. So this kind of, if you put this on truly at a Latino party, and specifically a Mexican party, you're going to get some type of reaction, in which I did. I played the whole thing at my daughter's 4th birthday at the end of the night, you know, when it turns into that the adult party in Latino party. So it was, I want to give him a shout out though, man. It's DJ Diego Alonso, and it's titled Mix Fiesta Mexicana. Justin, what you got?
All right, so I watched this podcast called R&B Money, hosted by Tank and his manager, Jay Valentine. So they bring in all kind of artists, older R&B superstars, current, mid, 90s, 80s, and they just talk about their kind of origin story, how they got to be where they were. The latest episode they had Robert Glasper on. And so Robert Glasper is kind of going through his origin story of how he got to where he was, what artists influenced him, who put him on his first gig, how he got his first album. It's amazing and hilarious. But he talked about some of the new projects that he's doing. And so he has a Christmas album out. It's not really that long. It's like 7 songs. It's called In December, and it's really good. It has the Robert Glasper sound, just the eclectic sound. The best song on the album is Little Drummer Boy, featuring this couple called the Baylors. But it's a really cool, it's an easy listen. And in my house, once Thanksgiving happens, it's Christmas. And so my wife is very Christmas heavy. And so you can't really play nothing outside of Christmas things. And because she's a musician and she's a vocalist and all of that, so I had to get my act together real quick. And so we transitioned from PJ's Christmas album last year to Robert Glasper's in December this year. So it's really good. It's really solid.
Nice. Kelvin, what you got for us, man?
Man, music wise, I pretty much listen to the same funk, old school kind of R&B. So I've been on a Bobby Blue Bland tip. I was watching this George Foreman movie. That was on. It's on Netflix now, but the movie, it came in the theaters. But the soundtrack was like all 70s and 80s stuff. So I went down the rabbit hole of like, man, that's Bobby Blue Bland song. So I just kind of binged out on that. So, but I'm pretty much in a playlist and it's on repeat. When I do listen to music, typically when I'm in my car, I'm on podcasts. And so the one I listen to a lot is Bigger Pockets, which is a real estate investing platform. They have a good one called Real Estate Rookie, which kind of breaks down things from a very tangible, nothing about real estate perspective, and that kind of really opened my capacity to realize that there are so many other things than what I thought traditionally real estate was, like a realtor or your contractor or your flipper. There's so many things in between. So that, and then the podcast I've listened to that's new for me at least is Club Shay Shay, Shannon Sharp's podcast, because he has a gift of like talking to celebrities, but they start talking like they're your uncle and your cousin. Yeah. And there are probably drinks involved in the conversations too, but like you learn so much about their people's lifestyle. Like Ric Flair just had an episode, and there are things I knew about Ric Flair just being a fan growing up, but it's like, man, this dude almost died. Just different stuff that Shannon has a gift, I think, of pulling these stories out of people. There's one on Marshawn Lynch that's just like hilarious. So anyway, so when I do have some time, I kind of check that out, called Club Shay Shay.
All right, we're back. So one thing I want to mention, man, I really appreciate the fact of you talking and being vulnerable about the fact that there's fear. This is inherent fear. We go to school, we get a degree, we're supposed to have job security. And whenever you want to bet on yourself, you're essentially saying, I don't have that job security. When you're going from W-2 to a W-9 and receiving 1099s now versus getting that W-2 and figuring out how to pay taxes and all those things. And it's like, it's different. But that's all it is. It's different. And I really like the fact that you said that, because me jumping into the higher ed space, I actually went to go interview all my trusted professors at Prairie View and told them, actually, I was like, hey, I'm jumping into this doctorate with the ultimate goal that I would love to come back and actually serve Prairie View as the coordinator of music education. So what should I do while I'm in my doctorate to come back and land that job? Like, what should I be focused on? Any special projects, any research? And the common theme from every single one of them was, you need to supplement your income. And I was like, okay, what? And they all said it. They're like, literally, Eric, you're going to get paid less. And so we all have a side hustle. Dr. Selden accompanies folks at recitals. I write for shows. I write for Tuts and et cetera. And it started hitting me. And I was like, oh, my goodness. Okay, why is that? And of course, all of this is public knowledge, especially if you want to look up folks on a public institution. Their salary is posted. And I think that's one thing that really shocks people when you get into that space, is that folks in higher ed are sometimes getting paid less than the teachers that they're sending out into the industry. And especially within music. And I know that's a prevalent thing that's happening right now. So because of that, me jumping into this new space outside of the classroom, I was already prepared in regards to a different living structure, living expenses. I made them less when I jumped into the higher ed space. So now essentially when I am betting on myself, and I started my LLC last year, my wife has her 1099 and we're doing virtual property management as well, is the fact that we're giving ourselves that flexibility. And it really, really hit me, man, when I started going to Mexico more often. And I started visiting spaces that were not the tourist attractions, the not coast towns, going to these Pueblo Mágicos and seeing people, and I kid you not, sitting in the plaza at sunset with their friends, drinking a cup of coffee. And I'm just like, you can visibly not see the stress that we have sometimes in this rat race of rushing home, eating dinner, getting the kids ready for the next day of school, and doing it all over again. That I got to see these guys literally enjoying their life, and you can tell they still had life to live. And that goes into my lived experience of me seeing my parents still working to this day, and wondering why is that? Why didn't we set up some certain things? And I'm looking at it as like, I'm not faulting them. They did the best they could with what they knew, but now I know better. And so I'm jumping into that space of, okay, let me do real estate investment. So I've dipped my toe in that and doing live-in flips. That I bought a house that was much cheaper, not as desirable, and I made it habitable. I remember my dad told me that. He's like, man, you better not put everything in that you want in this house. You let's put some sheetrock up and a fan, and let's get you living in this thing. And I'm like, yes, sir. And I didn't understand that, because you think, no, I graduated from college, I'm supposed to have the 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and it's like, no, you're not. You can go still live in an apartment, live frugally, and go and invest and build your wealth and all that kind of stuff. So for me, man, it meant so much for you to say that, because I know there's probably people thinking, man, I got this idea and I want to start this consulting company, but will people listen to me? But you know what? I can actually go and serve and provide percussion packages for schools that don't know how to serve students that look like us, et cetera. Like Justin and I have talked about that, where he's doing producing now for folks that are interested in launching their own podcast and doing their own creative music, because it's so many angles that we often think like, well, I do this on the side, but I don't really get paid for it. And then our humility kicks in sometimes, and it's like, well, you could just have it, and it's like, we don't know how to set up sometimes our structure to pay our worth. So all of that, man, I'm really grateful for that, because I keep up with you, and you and I have talked about the real estate and stuff, and it really excites me because I have an eye for that. So I'm in the plan of one day getting into that. My dream is, can I leave a rental property for each one of my kids, so when they get to 18, they can decide I sell that, and that's my tuition, and I don't have to worry about paying for school, or hey, I want to go into a trade and I use that as cash flow from this point on, or I live in it, or etc., or I rent it out,
or sell it. Yeah,
or sell it. Exactly, man. So man, so given that I know that feeling, what would you tell somebody that's on that edge of like, man, I got this idea, or I do want to leave the classroom and maybe jump into this consulting aspect of serving teachers and going to professional development? What would be your words to encourage them to take that leap of faith?
Yeah, it's finding your why. Why you want to do whatever it is you want to do. And that's something I even teach, or we tell our students, like, why do you want to be an educator? And we find out quickly, some people just don't like kids. So you don't need, there's something else in music you can do, not teaching a 6th grader how to play flute. But it's figuring out your why. And I for me was the legacy angle. But even before then, the reason I got into education was because I like people. Like, there was a situation when I was in 10th grade, I was in Hawaii. It was an assignment, like, figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life. And I remember having a conversation with my uncle at the time, Uncle Chuck, and he was like, whatever you want to do, find something you can wake up every day excited to do that you would do for free. And I remember going to bed, and I woke up and was like, you know what? I like people. And I like music. I'm going to be a band director. Even though my grandfather strongly tried to talk me out of being a band director, because you got to put in so many hours and all of that, because he lived that life. And so, but for me, it was, I like people and I like music. And throughout my life, it was always that order. It was always the people, then the music, which is why I think I personally, it really, really enjoy like the athletic band setting, because I'm dealing with a lot of people through music. It's not necessarily this music, and which I have an appreciation for, but I don't necessarily grind my gears on, I can spin this phrase in Lincolnshire Posey unlike anybody else, or I can do this piece by Stravinsky. I have an appreciation for it, but that's not what's going to wake me up every day if there isn't a human attachment to that, if that makes sense. So for me, it was the people thing. So even transitioning to like this newer phase is like, while I'm doing stuff on my schedule, how can I now impact people? So now when I work with charter schools, I'm probably working with thousands of kids now versus just 300 when I was at LSU. Even with my property portfolios, majority of them are leased out to single mothers, or we have a partnership with a military company that provides housing for traveling military families. So there's still an element to even my business structure to where, how can we help people? Even though some of the stuff we have is a flips, customarily you rehab and sell them, but a large portion of our portfolio is some kind of attachment element to help somebody, because that's what feeds my spirit of I firmly feel you get what you put out. And so how can, if I had to leave a legacy, I want to leave a legacy that dude impacted the masses. Not saying I'm Jesus, because Lord knows I'm not, but it's like, how can I live in his image? How can I do things to hopefully have a bigger and long-lasting legacy than what I have? Because I could be selfish, but I feel if I was being selfish, I wouldn't be blessed in the things that I've been blessed with. So It's a long-winded way of answering your question, Eric. Figure out what's your why. Why do you want to get into it? And then figure out a game plan you want to do to get in there. Maybe that teaching job you have, that W-2 job you have, like you need that to survive. You need to pay your bills. But as you do that, kind of what Eric mentioned of, all right, maybe I can downsize here. Yeah, maybe I'm in a 4-bedroom. I can get by with a 2. Or here's a real hack. Maybe I got a 4-bedroom house, or maybe I buy a duplex. And I stay in one side of the duplex and I rent out the other one. Or I got 4-bedroom house and it's just me. Let me just rent out I stay in my room. Let me put on Facebook Marketplace, or apartments.com, rent room. Basically, you're renting out your rooms in your house. And so maybe you do that for $300, $400, $500, $600. And that money you would get in, that's paying maybe your mortgage and maybe half your energy. So now that money you had there, you can then save that. And then you do that for a while, you figure it out, you understand how it is to be a landlord, and then you go out and, like Eric mentioned, you buy a house under FHA loan that's 3.5%. You do the exact same thing. Maybe, or maybe you get real smart. You find this house that's only 2 bedrooms right there, and so you buy that, but it's 2,000 square feet, and you can turn the dining room into a bedroom. And maybe there's a basement, you can put 2 bedrooms there. So you bought something that's 2 bedrooms, you turn it to 5 bedrooms, you rent it out 4 of the bedrooms. So you see, like, it goes back to like the puzzle, and then you figure that out, and then you do that, you set that up, you rent them out or whatever, and then you go out a year, you buy another one. And then after 5 years, you've bought 3 to 5 different properties. And maybe that's all cash flowing, $500, $600, let's say $500. And you have 3 properties. That's $1,500. Maybe that then covers your car note. Maybe that covers car note and groceries or whatever. And then you figure out another 2 or 3 years to do that. And so now you got $3,000 of cash flow. Maybe if you get another $500 of cash flow, that replaces your salary. So it's like you figure out a game plan to set you up whatever you want to do there. And then once you get to that point, then there's something called being financially free or FIRE, being ready to retire early and all that. But you're having all of these things you invested in, these assets, to then cover liabilities, your car note, clothes, or, I want to go to Miami this weekend. These 2 properties are going to pay for that. And so you come up with a game plan to figure out what you want to do, but it's all started on the why. Why do you want to do whatever it is you want to do? Because if it's not spiritually sound, it's not going to be set up on solid grounds.
Yeah, man, it's so funny that this episode is happening and we're talking about this stuff, because the next part of that moving to a new phase is now you have this time to think the very way that you were just talking about. So now that my job and my career now has opened up space where, I can have a working lunch somewhere from my office, or I can leave one of our sites, one of the campuses that I belong to, and go to another campus, or I can say, hey, I'm working the second half of the portion of work from home. That leaves me time to say, what are these other ideas that I've always had, but they've kind of been tucked in the back of my mind because I never had the mental space or physical space to even process how to accomplish and do those things. I have a vision for it, I have an idea for it, but now it becomes a reality that now me and my wife talking about an idea, or I wish we could have really done this. Now you spend time in prayer and you start researching, you start looking and thinking like, I can actually do that. I have the space, just because you've now opened yourself up to now navigate your life the way you want to navigate it, and not be so controlled by, okay, I need to have this, I need to meet with my show producer, I got to meet with my arranger, I got to talk about this, I got to know this, I got to do all of these things, that you become a taskmaster. And I think for me, what really registers what you said was the fact that, being a band director, we can look at a piece all day and think about the counterpoint and how to flip this chord and all of that, but I'm just excited that I get to work with kids, and pour into their lives, and I get to meet people from different walks of life, and the excitement and joy that I get, and the fact that I get to do that in my current position, it opens my mind to even more of like, how can I be more around people and impact them the same way that they've impacted me? And so this is just great, man. And I think the other thing that really marks me is it goes back to, you went to Jackson, me and Eric went to Prairie View, and in our minds, we were trying to become or do something that would have validated why we walked on that campus. When in actuality, when we walked on that campus, there were people that were trying to validate us in the moment to say, hey, you can actually do this and be okay with competing and doing well. I know you want to have a great program, but also don't miss the joy of why you're doing it. And I think we walked into those spaces. Part of the freedom that it is from walking out of those spaces is that I no longer have to lead with what I've done or where I've been for you to validate who I am.
Man.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I can just be because, man, you know, when I walk into spaces now and they, you know, I'm doing all kind of things on my job, and they're like, man, how did you come up with this? And, oh, you made a flyer for that. And then I was like, I had to do all of this as a band. Like, I had to do at the programs that I was teaching at. Like, I had to create a newsletter for my parents. I had to lead within. I had to create an agenda for the band parent meeting. I had to make sure that there was a plan B, C, D, and E just in case this didn't work, you know? And so in this space, it's like, man, we need that ingenuity. Man, you was able to do that. Okay, you built the list. You got a budget, man, so much. And I'm just like, man, in my space, I was trying to make sure, like, I tried to get a 1 or like keeping myself in a certain, like how many kids made the all city or region band. Cause then when I walk into that conference room or the point room or the break area, they were like, well, what are you running this year? What do you know? And so it's just a reminder, man, that like our careers are going to be our careers because of what's on the inside of us. You know what I'm saying? Like who you are, who Eric is, whether we would have ever became music educators, we would have been where we are because of the essence of what drives us and what pushes us. And so I think, man, this is just a great conversation for me.
Man, you're so 1,000% right, man. Like you can't have music without people. So that's my philosophy in there. Like if there's no people, unless we're going to go to, you know, AI or something, you know, it's like, that's not what we do. Like you need a warm body to put air through that instrument or to strike it or whatever. So that's that. But the piece you just said made me resonate. Like I consult with my old school district I taught at, West Feliciana High School. And the superintendent told me the reasons that he reached out was because of the lively impacts that we had when I was here. And it wasn't because, man, we haven't been, it wasn't, not one time has he said, you know, when you were here, you got sweepstakes and we hadn't had sweepstakes since you were here. Mm-hmm. So we need you back because we got sweepstakes. That wasn't even in his idea. It was, man, we had kids that loved music. We had kids that went to college. Like people in the community still talk about when Mr. Jones was here. Like it was the pouring of people that, you know, gather what you do, which, in my opinion, which makes education so freaking awesome, because you may see something in that kid that the English teacher doesn't see. The math teacher may say that kid's just lazy or whatever, but you can see something in that kid that can inspire and incite and all the things. And I'm saying band, that's my vehicle, but sports and other things have that vehicle too. But what everybody doesn't gravitate to sports. Everybody doesn't gravitate to other things, you know, so there's a whole thing about being artistic, you know, having an artful spirit. So you can do so much with kids and take them to a place they didn't even think they could go just by inspiring them and inspiration through a vehicle of playing in tune and playing in time, playing in tone, moving together, all those things. But its true essence is unity and being together and unified in an approach. So yeah, that's, in my opinion, that's the juice, if you will, the weekly juice, you know, in order to do things. So
yeah, that's what me and Eric thrived on. I think during that time, you know, people would always ask us, even now, we're just blessed to go around and speak and do all this stuff that me and Eric are like, y'all want to hear us talk about like what we was doing? Like, I mean, there's no magic, you know what I'm saying? But I think for me and Eric, like, yeah, we wanted to be very well versed in terms of our pedagogical approach, but at the end of the day, Eric is a people person. I am a people person. And so we thrive upon, like, my passion for teaching was that I was able to impart something to someone that made them see themselves in a different light. Because that's what Mr. Taylor did for me. That's what my high school band did for me. That's what I saw my grandmother doing as a teacher. What my mother did as a teacher was like, they're able to tell something to someone to better help them understand, which also gives them confidence, which builds their level of belief, which allows them to see further and, you know, deeper than what they were right before they was trying to work out that math problem or trying to figure out this phrase in this region piece or whatever the case may be. And so I just think, man, like the heart of this episode is not only the hustle of like how can you further diversify your income and be free from feeling like you got to sit behind the desk or climb the ladder for the next 20 to 15 years, but that at the end of the day, the hustle has never been about what you know as much as it's about what you're willing to put out and give to people. You know what I'm saying? Like what I'm hearing from your story and what I'm hearing just from getting to know you in this time is that the hustle is about how can I impact the people that are around me, whether I'm at the middle school, the high school, the collegiate, the real estate world, the consulting world, the world of arranging or helping other young band directors. Like, how can I impact? What is that hustle? How do I get to learn how do I take from, like you said, in my trumpet section, I got these people, they like to play video games. They're not going to class. Like, how do I use all of these things to make sure we can accomplish whatever we need to get done for Friday night, while at the same time, like I'm learning them, and they take a lot of like when you learn your students and really know what makes them click, like that lets them know that they're cared for and that they're valued. And I think ultimately the hustle is about how do you value people. Me and Eric are trying to constantly say something 100 times a different way, but ultimately the message is how do you show value through care, through patience, through understanding, through love, not because you know everything or you're well versed in that said community, cultural difference or whatever, but that you are willing to be uncomfortable and in a space where you're learning something. So this has been solid for me, man.
Oh yeah,
much inspiring.
Just saying, people don't care how much you know, how much you care. So yeah.
So man, I know folks are gonna want to will probably reach out to you. How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so talk to my agent, Eric Jimenez. No, no, I'm on Instagram. Kelvin D. Jones on Instagram there. A website, drkelvinjones.com. If you wanted to see like what all is this fool really doing. My investment company is Invest with APE. So APE stands for All Positive Energy. If you haven't gotten that about me in these last few minutes, it's kind of how I operate. So my company is APE Investments, but it stands for All Positive Energy. So investwithape.com is the website to kind of see kind of our real estate journeys and how we kind of try to help people in that regard there. I'm on Facebook, Kelvin Jones there. I don't TikTok. I don't Snapchat. I guess I'm old now. I realized that talking to some kids earlier today, and they're like, man, you're like from the 90s. That's crazy. So, here we are. So I'm about to sign up for AARP soon. So once I get that, I give my member number. I'm joking. But yeah, you can find me on those platforms. So
man, we really appreciate you, bro, for your vulnerability. I know probably people gonna listen to this and be like, what has he been doing? And we're really happy for you, man, that you have this life structure that is giving you what you need right now in your season of life. And I think that's what I took away from this is that, put yourself in a position that you can make those decisions and have the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to try this. And I have the opportunity to do so. I don't have the fear of not having enough money to pay the mortgage next month. Like, I'm set up. We got a little nest egg. We can take this leap of faith. And so I know if I had listened to this episode back at the pandemic when my wife lost her job and I was working at Lowe's and the seasonal job while I was working at Prairie View to just make ends meet, this would have reaffirmed that I'm on the right track. That it's like, okay, yeah, you might, like, I remember thinking, man, I'm wrangling up those carts at Lowe's and I'm like, man, I got a year of coursework left in the doctorate and I'm over here getting carts from the, the parking lot. And it was a really humbling moment for me to say, okay, this is a job though. Keep going. You know how to hustle and don't stop. And so that experience has lent me now to where I'm at in my life and the opportunities that are leading that. So if you're listening to this and you have that idea in your back pocket, hopefully you're hearing this and saying, you know what, I'm gonna try it. Let that side hustle end up being your main hustle and give you those opportunities for freedom if you so choose to want them. So on behalf of the Score, bro.
Yeah,
please jump in.
Expound on something real quick, Eric?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, because what you just said is so important. Well, two things. One, this isn't me 20 years ago. Like I had to find success and do things right to create a reputation or whatever you want to call the it thing to allow me to do that. So that's one for those listening with that. You got to find something you do and do it really, really well, and get grow from that. That's the foundation. But the second thing Eric said, I think is so important in regards to even just a little bit earlier, like your pathway may be different than how you intended. Or if you're feeling, man, I got to work at Lowe's, but I see my professor, he didn't have to do this or she didn't have to do this. Like your pathway may be different. Think about it when you put in Google Maps. If I'm trying to drive from Baton Rouge to Orlando, Florida, I type in Orlando, and then it'll show me 3 or 4 different ways to get there. Don't pay tolls this way. Go around this way, whatever. Here's the fastest. So your pathway may be a detour. And to be quite honest, your pathway may be unlike anything seen before. Like I couldn't look up and say who from Jackson State is director of LSU, right? Or anything like that. Like your pathway, it may be different. And for me, that's God ordained. But through that pathway, you build your testimony. Because then you can go back and say, you know what? I had to work at Lowe's to do all this stuff to get to where I am. That makes it more meaningful. So whatever side hustle or side hustles you have to do to provide for your family. And Lord knows I can't stand I have a single mama and my cousins own drugs. Like you name it, I've done, I've been a part of it. Like I didn't even tell testimony about my grandfather, my grandparents getting poisoned. Can't eat white meat chicken because white meat's for white folks. So it's like, I have my own testimony behind all of that, but not at one point did that deter my family from trying to create a better environment for their kids, their grandkids, their great-grandkids. All that to say, regardless of where you are in the journey of life, like keep following that pathway. It may be unlike anything you've seen before, but that's your pathway to get to your destination. That's going to be the testimony that you can then hopefully help and inspire others that are going through that same kind of obstacle. So don't get stuck into where you are right now. Have eyesight on what the future is going to be.
Well, folks, that was the other episode right there. That last part. So we're gonna splice that. No, man, thank you. I know you said you didn't want to let that. That's why. And if you're wondering, folks, we let our guests always pick the title of their episode, and that right there at the end was exactly why we do that. That the passion, the heart, the lived experience literally comes through the microphone and gives folks the opportunity to be heard. So thank you again, bro.
No, my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me on. This has been fun and interesting to hear, both of you all's journey, because sometimes things like this don't get talked about in our profession. It's, hey, what are you doing for assessment? What are you doing?
Right.
How are you doing? Which I get. You need that information. You need that content. You have to grow. But a lot of times we don't talk about life. Like, hey, man, how are you doing in your taxes?
Right.
What kind of deductions, or things going on with that? What are things that you can do, outside of what we do in our classroom? So same way you were saying, I wish people would have had at least these conversations to A, make it valid that my thoughts are valid, but then 2, to kind of have me go through the exploratory method of, okay, how can I structure this? How could I do this while doing what I'm doing? Or what experiences have you gone through that I can avoid that can save me some of that time in that journey? So, no, this is awesome. Like, I wish I had some insight into these things beforehand. It probably would have fast-tracked some things in my life, or gave me a little bit more freedom to do more things sooner. Like the whole house hacking thing I mentioned. Like, if I would have known about that when I was 20 or 21, and man, I would have rented out. I would have had bunk beds in my house.
Exactly. Thanks again, bro.
Thank you, bro.
This has been another production of The Score. Connect with us on social media at Pod The Score. Send us an email, podthescore@gmail.com, or visit our website, revivalmusicproject.org. If you've enjoyed this episode, do us a huge favor. Rate and review us. This will help us reach even more listeners. Intro music by Justin McLean. The rotation and outro music by Ben Borges. And as always, let's continue to impact these lives through the vehicle of music.